Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for being here again. Thank you for liking and subscribing. So I took a couple weeks off just, because of the holidays and stuff. And happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year. Just to spend with my husband and my kids. We pretty much been, of course, locked in the house, but we wanted to take some time just spending with each other and all that fun stuff. And then my daughter's birthday. So we just took some time away, but now I'm back and ready to go. If you are new here, thank you so much for being here. Just to let you know, on this page, we talk about just racial issues, we talk about injustice, we talk about those things to give us some sort of racial reconciling, if you will, to try to bring understanding for people and for us who just may not know about the issues that have been faced and the issues that we may continue to face. I am so glad that you are here. So today, I want to talk about something that I have mentioned in previous videos, and I kept saying I would talk about those things, and I never got a chance to talk about it. But today, I'm going to talk about redlining. I want to talk about redlining, kind of tell you a little bit about it, and how it still affects us today. And I think talking about redlining will help us bring a little bit more understanding as to why we see things the way they are now, and how there's this trickle effect where people may believe that systemic racism doesn't exist or that it doesn't have an effect today still, and it absolutely does. And while housing discrimination was made illegal, people do illegal things all the time, unfortunately, and so housing discrimination obviously does still happen today. And so I want to talk about those things. I want to address that, and just to be informed and know more, and that we can grow more and have more of an empathy and understanding with things that have happened in the past and today. And so so I want to talk about redlining. So in the 1930s, after the war, government surveyors, they surveyed land. And what happened was they found the land that was most desirable rather, and least desirable. And what they did was they color coded them. And what happened was they lined in red, they literally took a map and lined in red the areas that were least desirable. So any neighborhoods that had minorities in them, so whether it was African Americans, Jews, any immigrants or anything, were automatically classified as least desirable because of who was in those neighborhoods. And so what they did was they would not give loans in certain areas because people in their mind thought that if they had any sort of minority move into their neighborhood, that it would decrease their home value. And that's what the banks thought. And so the banks either didn't give loans out to minorities in these areas, or they made the loans completely unattainable, where they couldn't pay them super high interest rates, things like that. And they knew this because homeownership is one of the number one ways to accumulate wealth. I can buy a home or a property, I can either fix it up, I can gain equity in a house. We see all the time HGTV where they buy a house for $60,000 and flip it for $200,000, right? And so homeownership was and still is one of the great ways to build wealth. That's why this is one of the reasons why we see such a big wealth gap between white families and black families. It's like 10 times. And what was happening was these people were able to buy this property, these houses, and sell them for more money. Of course, that's how, the economy works. Sometimes the housing market dips, sometimes it gets higher. You have a buyer's market, you have a seller's market. They were selling their properties and being able to build wealth and able to send their kids to college and all of those things. And what was happening was these more desirable or most desirable properties were being built close to highways. And they were building them close to highways because you would easily be able to commute back and forth to work from a highway. The further you were away from the highway, the less able you were to, say, get a job, really, because how do you get to work if you don't have a way to transport there? So the FHA institutionalized the system of discriminatory lending in government-backed mortgages. So they had race-based criteria in their underwriting, and it was just reinforcing residential segregation in America. And these housing practices continued until 1968, guys. 1968 was when redlining was made illegal. Now think about that. 1968. Now I'm not that old, I'm 32. And my husband is 42. And my husband was born only 10 years after redlining was made illegal, which means that our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents obviously were all somewhat victims of redlining. So with redlining, that's how we see areas now, where we see predominantly white areas and predominantly black or minority areas. And the reason redlining affects us today is because, for instance, how schools are funded. So schools are funded obviously through property taxes. And the higher the property taxes, almost always the better the schools are funded. Obviously, there's more money coming in, there's more money being funded to the schools. And so you have it where you have these predominantly white areas, for instance, that were created in redlining, that are currently existing today, that have well-funded schools, right? And so they have, where I remember a long time ago, there was this thing going around where they were taking out like extracurricular activities like music and things like that. They were having to take them out because they weren't being funded well. I went to predominantly white schools growing up, and so I never saw that firsthand. But once I got older and started to work in different areas and moved to different areas, I started to realize that there are a ton of schools really in lower income areas that don't have some activities, extracurricular activities, as other schools have. For instance, just giving an example with sports, there are some schools that have sports teams and some schools that don't have those sports teams, or even like musically. So you'll have schools that do have choir programs or art programs, and some schools that don't. They just don't have the money and the funding to go towards that. And then get this, 91% of areas that were classified as best, or in the 1930s that were sold to only white people at that time, remained middle to upper class. And 85% of those areas from the 1930s, 85% are still to this day predominantly white areas. So banks largely blamed the lending disparities on credit scores. But here's the thing, get this. As of last year, 2019, Wells Fargo agreed to pay the city of Philadelphia $10 million, okay? Or I said last year, 2019, okay? So almost last year, I was close. It's only the 5th day of the month, okay? I'm trying. And they were settling the lawsuit that alleged that they had discriminated against minority borrowers, okay? So we're talking as of 2019, and the lawsuit was actually brought up in 2017 against Wells Fargo. And so I want to read this for you, okay? So it says that Philadelphia alleged that Wells Fargo violated the Fair Housing Act by steering African American and Latino borrowers into mortgages that were riskier and more expensive than those offered to similarly situated white home buyers. That in turn accelerated foreclosures and a number of abandoned properties. The complaint alleged, which suppressed property values, reduced the city's property tax revenues, and increased the cost of providing municipal services. So remember in the beginning when I said that while we say, well, you know, there's the same opportunities for everybody, and while yes, redlining is illegal now, but we can see Wells Fargo just settled a $10 million lawsuit because they were discriminatory against with their loans. They were doing redlining in 2017 and they had to pay for it. And it just goes to show you that unfortunately systemic racism is still a thing in America. And it's not just in policing, it's not just in one or two areas or in healthcare. Unfortunately, it currently still is here in things like lending practices and banks. And, you know, that's why I think it's super important to know interest rates and to understand what the market is, things like that. Because if you do that, you know, sometimes we put a lot of trust in people who we hope have our best interests at heart. But, you know, like Wells Fargo, I bet a lot of those people put their trust into whoever was working on their loans. And, you know, we bought a home before, so I definitely get it, how vulnerable you are and how much information you're giving these people. And you would hope that they have your best interest at heart and they want to see you do well. And I do believe that there are people out there that do. Trust me, please don't get me wrong. But these things do still happen today. And so I wanted to address redlining and talk about it, and so that we understand that unfortunately, even though these things are illegal, people do illegal things all the time. This stuff isn't new. It's unfortunate, but thank you guys so much again for always liking and subscribing and tuning into the YouTube channel. You're amazing, and I know that we are going to continue to learn and grow and to be better. And I know when we know better, we do better. I love you guys. Bye.